Chapter 1. Night Hunters. The night had descended upon the city, spreading its wings silently and gently. The moon flickered dimly from behind the clouds, casting long shadows on the deserted streets. Silence enveloped the city, hanging like a tightly drawn string. The air was filled with new scents, the smell of fear, the smell of death, and the intoxicating smell of fresh blood. A huge gray wolf lifted his head and growled softly. The signal to hunt had been given, and he had received it. It was time. Time to claim his rights. Moving stealthily through the alleys, a ruthless machine of death glided forward. The wolf was hungry. A werewolf. Born to kill. Forward, through the already familiar maze of city streets, paths, and lampposts. Only forward. The night is long, and a victim will always be found. But not every human can be killed. Those drunkards over there, not worth dirtying his hands, nor the aftermath of choking on them. His eyes keenly scanned the darkness. Sharp ears caught the slightest rustle. He must not be discovered. The first rule of a werewolf. A human who learns of a werewolf must be killed. It doesn't matter how he found out. It doesn't matter who he is. Keeping him alive will cost the lawbreaker his life and bring eternal shame to his name. These lines were indelibly etched into the consciousness of each of them, like scars that never heal, like fresh wounds that never close. No law can be broken. He had two lives. The first, the daytime life, as a boy named Marcus, a kind and responsive lad with unusual sapphire-colored eyes, cheerful, trusting, and open. And the second, the nighttime life, the wolf's life. In the pack, he had no name. He didn't need one. Here, everyone knew each other by the soul, perhaps. He changed. Completely. No trace of that kindness remained. Only his eyes didn't change color. They remained the same, unusual even among wolves. And yet they were far more ruthless, but at the same time deep and sorrowful, like small lakes among sharp mountain peaks. He didn't know he had two halves, didn't remember. It was unusually deserted. Strange. It's not even midnight yet. Footsteps behind him. Swiftly turning and silently stepping aside, waiting for the moment. He could see her perfectly, his future victim. He heard her steps, her steady breathing. She came closer. The wolf blocked her path. No escape. A girl, very young with terrified eyes and chestnut hair. She tried to step aside, to leave, to fight. In vain. The mocking look of the sapphire eyes held her. She couldn't move. The fear in the human eyes suddenly disappeared. It was replaced by recognition. The wolf growled in confusion. "Marcus?" the girl uttered, confidently, although her voice trembled. No fear, pity, misunderstanding. The desire to kill vanished. Marcus. Something familiar in this name. Something familiar in this girl. As if from somewhere far away, warmth. The heart responded. What nonsense. I am a wolf. The girl looked very boldly, straight into the soul, bypassing all other shells. I recognized you by your eyes, she smiled. Recognized. Marcus, it's me. The wolf understood. He didn't remember, but he understood. Now he knew why he didn't know the days, why only the night existed for him. And not only for him, for all of them. He could. Now he could. The first rule of a werewolf. Realization cut through him like a knife. Old wounds, deep scratches on the crust of consciousness. Marcus. Perhaps she was also a werewolf. Unrevealed, new. After all, she recognized him. She wasn't afraid of him. He tried to talk to her. In his wolf language. Do you understand me? He leaned close to her, but he read the answer long before he finished the question. Misunderstanding, surprise. And again, no fear. The first rule of a werewolf. The wolf raised his head to the indifferent moon and howled, desperately, with all the sorrow. Then he turned his head. The girl was still standing there. The pity in her eyes hurt sharper than any knife. It would be better if she were afraid. He lowered his head to her. Kill or die. For a true predator, the choice is simple and spontaneous. A blow, and in complete silence, only one wolf remained. In the moonlight, silver streams of blood glistened on his muzzle. Not his blood. The night, truly the wolf's time. Perhaps tomorrow, in the daytime, the boy named Marcus would remember nothing, and certainly not know where his best friend had disappeared to. Wolves leave no traces. From now on, the werewolf has no heart. They say time heals. Chapter 2. Consequences. Marcus woke up after a nightmare. Usually he didn't have such dreams, very rarely, and today's was unlike anything else. Vivid, realistic, but blurred and tangled. Marcus was forgetting some detail with every second. A wolf with human eyes, a girl, the silver moon, and death. Marcus shook his head, pushing the dream to the background. After all, it didn't happen. The night brought strange news, strange and frightening. There was still an hour before the hunt, inconceivably early. What made them transform right after sunset? One of us was discovered. The first rule has been broken. Everyone gather in the cave, immediately. These words were heard by all the wolves in the huge city, all of them wherever they were. The leader's order echoed through the city, now ruled by predators. The first rule had been broken. The gray wolf with sapphire eyes heard it too. The city buzzed. People didn't know about this nocturnal life, and there was no need for them to know. They had enough of the reports of missing persons. For the first time in the wolf's memory, the first rule had been broken. For the first time. And again, the past night came back to him. A vague memory, like fresh paints smeared with water. He didn't remember the moment of killing. Only now did the wolf realize it. He remembered the footsteps behind him. He remembered the look, the slowness, the attempt to speak. And that's all. The werewolf didn't remember if he killed. The colors mixed at any attempt to restore them. For a moment the thought flickered, to leave and not show up. The wolf angrily drove it away. He couldn't run away, by definition. The cave was on the outskirts of the city. This place had never been found. Here the pack gathered for important matters, and sometimes just because. The werewolf walked through the familiar corridor maze and found himself inside. Everyone had gathered, and he had never seen the leader so furious. "The first rule has been broken." The words echoed in their minds, wounding the soul. One of us broke it. The first time in the last 150 years. The violator must die and be eternally shamed. Whoever hunted on Strachan Boulevard last night, step forward. The wolf felt unpleasant threads of fear entangling his mind. One sharp movement, and he tore them apart. He must accept his death if he deserved it. He himself was to blame. The first rule of a werewolf, the sacred law. A couple of steps and stepping forward. There were 5 of them, those assigned to the boulevard. He knew each one far better than the others. Wolves don't know the word friendship, but they understand its meaning much better. Sometimes. His almost partner, green eyes, liquid emerald with cracks of fear, snow-white fur. It's somewhat pleasant to realize you're not the only one afraid. "I am not afraid. I am a wolf," Marcus mentally reminded himself, trying to suppress any doubts. The leader's gaze burned through them all, a gaze full of cold anger. "You will undergo a mental interrogation, now." The wolf involuntarily winced. Once he had already had this dubious honor. The leader moved on to the first of them. A coal-black she-wolf with whom no one could get along. She seemed to be fenced off by an ice wall. Their gazes met. The wolf remembered that procedure. It felt like two red-hot spears were piercing your eyes. You couldn't look away, you couldn't lie a little or remain silent. The book of memory would open to the right page, and the one asking would find a way to copy its pages. Just don't move and don't try to lie. The leader passed by. "You may go." The address was only to the she-wolf, but everyone heard it. The same result for the other three. The snow-white wolf with emerald eyes. His eyes met the leader's. The interrogation lasted long, too long. The ringing tension was clearly audible in the air. The leader looked away. The silence grew louder. "I have identified the violator." 3 words, 3 blows. The wolf with sapphire eyes lifted his head. They wouldn't even ask him now. "You, who broke the first rule of a werewolf," the leader's voice became much harsher. "You endangered our lives, our pack. You violated the sacred law, and you will be punished. You must die. Shame will fall upon your name and your kin. Do you have a family?" The question was purely formal. "No." "Well then, you will be put to death now. Renounce your right to life and name." "I renounce." The emerald faded and darkened. The leader raised his eyes, expressing nothing. Now his eyes met those of Sapphire. "This is your kill. You didn't pass the interrogation." This wasn't a rule, a tradition. But sometimes traditions are honored more than rules. The wolf lowered his gaze. A quiet, private conversation. "Weren't you there almost at the same time as me?" "No. An hour later. Don't ask any more. Kill." The gray wolf struck. Quickly and mercilessly. The pain would come later, and the incomprehensible feeling of guilt. Now, only the goal. Don't think. A moment, and the scarlet drops stood out sharply on the snow-white velvet, and the emeralds shattered in the eyes. The first rule had been broken. The wolf with sapphire eyes lowered his muzzle. "Disperse. From now on, we must be doubly cautious. We have been discovered. Hunt more carefully, leave no trace. For a week we will have to retreat to the forest," the leader announced, ending the meeting. But only one question. Shouldn't this death have been mine? Chapter 3. Beyond the line, it's always dark here. Black, impenetrable darkness, with no right to return, no right to hope. Almost the final line. The living have no place here. Only the rules are easily broken. Easily, at first glance. For werewolves, crossing the line meant almost what clinical death is for humans. It had long been considered the most difficult and dangerous. In the abode of fear, one must not be afraid. This is the main thing. To survive. To keep one's mind and soul. To survive. In the darkness, 2 blue stars flashed. Flashed and went out. There was no place for any light here. This departure wasn't planned. Wasn't carefully prepared, or even expected. Suddenly, a cold and sharp wind mercilessly tore through the gray fur. Confusion. Why am I here? Silence. I feel life within me. This feeling is heightened here, a sense of alienness. Not dead, that's good. Why am I here? I demand an answer. The silence, with a hint of mockery. Cold in the eyes. If this is a mistake, but leaving is impossible. Neither to wake up nor to break free. It means I am needed here. Only every minute saps strength. Whoever owns this place does nothing for no reason. A little more, and the wolf won't be able to return. The unspoken question hung in his throat. Understanding struck him like a blow to the heart. The wolf closed his eyes, remembering. And then, recognizing the scent, summoned. Hard, insanely hard. and leaving the choice to the summoned. It's easier not to name names. There's no point in tormenting oneself more since I'm already beyond the line. There is no time here. But the wait felt agonizingly long. Who knows? Did 2 hours pass or 5 minutes? The summons was heard. He was no longer alone. The wolf bristled at the first rustle. She was dead. He had committed the murder. The feeling of guilt so heightened dissipated and almost laughable. But the ghost still smiled, without a hint of fear, though what is there to fear now? But still. "Hello, Marcus," the girl said. He recoiled as if from a blow. Had he forgotten what it felt like? And unable to withstand the piercing gaze, lowered his eyes. "Well, it seems you are easily defeated." A wave of rage, anger, and pain? But then the contours of the ghost began to waver. It grew brighter around. He was now allowed to go. It was time. With an effort of will, he tore himself out of the darkness, and managed to see only a nearly sad smile. Werewolves do not know how to apologize, and they don't know how to forgive. Marcus opened his eyes. The bright shadow on the ceiling caught his attention. A scary dream, just a dream, or even a dream within a dream. Chapter 4. Night Conversations. Turning point: fear, pain, despair, mercy, kindness, love. These are human feelings. I am not human. Strange, it wouldn't have occurred to me to hammer this into my head before. Could I be changing? This realization hit sharply, like a blow from a steel blade. Impossible. Anxiety was also a human feeling. Calm down, freeze. The night is long. The hunt tonight had been successful and quick. There was time to think. He didn't feel tired. He had slept all day. Although, what is a day? It's a pity he had this time. Too many fears are exposed in the dark. Too many unnecessary secrets. Too many hasty promises. The wolf laughed, silently, mentally, at himself. Besides, no one would hear. Hopefully. Answer the unvoiced questions, werewolf. Answer them to yourself. What wounds you? You've seen many deaths. You've been beyond the line. But why does that death hurt you so much? The girl with piercing gray eyes. Name. She uttered a name. Marcus. She instilled restlessness and uncertainty, fear, doubt, and something new, unknown, searing. You're here, he shuddered. The coal-black she-wolf, one of those who had recently stood with him before the trial. Strange. It was impossible to establish contact with her. Here. Do you have business with me? Yes and no. A mental smile smirk. I found out that you recently exercised the right. Oh, yes. The right to summon your victim. The right of every werewolf. The only right where no laws apply. But how did she find out? Don't ask. Ice. Werewolves are good empaths. They feel emotions. The black she-wolf had none. Only ice. I should have the same. But what's it to you? The question was asked somewhat sharply. You're changing. You went beyond the line without a second thought. Missed the hunt. You have many thoughts. Many feelings. You're becoming different. Yes. What difference does it make? A month has passed since then. Everything is back to normal. Oh no. That's what you think. Something awaits you that I cannot know. Everything collapses in an instant. With a blow, sometimes two. You didn't notice. But the thread of your previous life was weakening gradually. And then, in a moment, everything collapsed. There is no way back. Don't look back. Just don't look back. Perhaps. He didn't dare to be frank. He raised his muzzle to the stars and looked. A long, attentive gaze. The gaze of a wolf who has lost everything. No, not everything yet. I have the pack. I have a she-wolf with eyes the color of the evening sun, even if she hasn't shown herself for many days. I have a life. But a goal? What is my goal? Why do I live? You're beginning to understand? A smile. The wolf's sapphire eyes pierced the night fabric. A silent duel of glances. Ice against a small spark. Darkness against a tiny star. The coal-black she-wolf averted her gaze. She didn't acknowledge defeat. There was simply no point in victory. I don't know about your path, but I am neither your ally nor your enemy. I understand. The she-wolf left silently. The night conversation was over, and fragments of thoughts still raced in his head, mixing and intertwining. Perhaps changing isn't so bad. It's inevitable. An hour before dawn. It was getting lighter bit by bit. Keen ears caught movement. A scent. Restlessness. The werewolf bristled. Took a few steps at random. A human. A child. A girl with bright red hair. Water smeared on her face. Wolves don't know how to cry. But the werewolf easily read her emotions. Fear, pain, despair. And he understood her perfectly. For so many years they were taught to hate humans. Hatred, knowing no bounds. But now the wolf felt nothing like that. He didn't even know what was going on inside him. Strange. People are somewhat like us. And what nonsense comes to mind? The girl stopped crying, looked directly at the wolf. He realized what was happening. He needed to kill. Now. She suddenly smiled and extended her hand awkwardly. Did you come for me? And again, no fear. He was used to inspiring fear. Almost, he tried to answer, completely forgetting who was in front of him. She smiled. Then, you came for me. Does the child understand him? Understand his speech? Impossible. She is not a werewolf. Unrevealed ones gain the ability to understand the speech of their kind much older. There are no children among werewolves. She is not a wolf. The first rule of a werewolf forgotten? He looked at her. There was no other way. Everything would come later. Harden his mind and kill. He raised his paw for a fatal blow, and didn't have time. Small cold hands trustingly lay on his fur. Unexpectedly. Damn it, what nonsense. The only thing clear, I can't kill her. Must. No. A silent duel. Between responsibility and a new burning feeling. A duel within one soul. Nothing special happened. A blow, and that's all. Suddenly he remembered. He remembered the battle. Just over a year ago. The desperate eyes of wolf cubs. He himself, then newly transformed. Snow. Sunset flames reflected in the eyes. Even if they are not werewolves, they are almost kin. This must not be allowed. Never. The wolf pushed away the terrifying memories and turned to the child. Emptiness in her eyes. Deep down, there was despair and a tiny drop of interest. I'm sorry. I understand, the girl said quietly with an almost adult voice. But I can help. Help? What nonsense. I know who you are, she said as if against her will. Even I don't know that. Killer? The wolf looked away and stepped back. He couldn't. Simply couldn't. Soon, others will know about you. Not from me. I'll explain everything to you, Marcus. Chapter 5. Departure. Werewolves shouldn't complain about pain. We shouldn't cry. We can't ask for mercy. Never rely on help. And shouldn't show that it bothers us. The wolf, who turned into Marcus by day, looked at the stars again. The little girl with infinitely wise eyes. Who is she? Marcus? Why does she call him by that strange name? The pieces of the puzzle refused to fit together. It made the wolf angry. Explain to me, he turned his head to her. No time to explain. The wolf caught the sound of soft, silent steps. It's time to go, he said coldly. Fear gnawed at his heart again. The girl nodded to him and disappeared into the night. The wolf knew where she was going. Time to prepare for the meeting. Hello? The pack leader looked at him with eyes as dark as the night. I wasn't expecting you. A lie. He was. They understood each other. A thin, thread-like smile flashed in the eyes of his interlocutor. Or better to say, opponent. You're easy to destroy. He knew. This phrase had been spinning in his mind for an eternity. I don't remember being different. Or do I? Pretend not to understand. Harden his gaze and heart. Why do you need me? The leader smirked. The wolf involuntarily looked away. Don't you know? You are suspected of associating with humans. His heart skipped a beat. And another. It's so simple. Tell, betray, and remain a wolf. No, he couldn't. Everything had changed. You're mistaken. More indifferent surprise. One could wish to believe. The leader left without another word. The wolf watched him for a long time. His old life was over. He waited a few agonizing minutes. Called the girl. Marcus? I didn't ask your name. Ray. Ray, we need to go. They found out about you. She wasn't surprised. But in the wolf's soul, fear throbbed. Let's go. We're heading to the forests. For now. Chapter 6. Escape. Time is a strange thing. There is never as much of it as you need. Sometimes so much that you just don't know what to do with it. And sometimes, catastrophically little. It's a shame time can't be saved. Transferred from torturous hours of idleness to where extra minutes are desperately needed. They were leaving. A gray shadow quickly glided through the night city. Ray sat on the wolf's back. For the first time in many centuries, the werewolf carried a human. Humans, enemies. It had always been so. But no one ever cared why. Who set this rule? However, the wolf with sapphire eyes didn't care now. He had already broken many rules. He had already changed and shattered his life. What made him renounce himself? Become a traitor? Yes. He betrayed his laws. He betrayed everyone he knew. No matter how you look at it, there's no other way to say it. For what? And didn't it mean he also betrayed himself? Now was not the time to seek answers. They had to run. They had to make it. With soft, quick leaps, he covered the distance. At any moment, they could be caught. If, of course, the chase had begun. The night air was cold and harsh. The weather was slowly changing. It seemed that humans called this time of year autumn. To leave unnoticed, they needed to cross the city. Head to the secret exit to the forests. Taking the known common path. Madness. It was well guarded. The girl seemed to have fallen asleep, gripping the wolf's fur with cold fingers. Let her sleep. He wouldn't let her fall. He didn't even notice the black shadow ahead. Didn't even have time to be surprised when, in one of the narrow alleys, a black she-wolf appeared on his path. Her icy eyes met the eyes of the fugitive. Fate brings us together for the third time, she greeted her acquaintance. The gray werewolf stepped back. Fear slowly crept into his consciousness. It was becoming a habit. Only now his own life was not the main concern. He needed to protect Ray. Somehow. Why had the little companion become dear to him? No time to think. No time for anything. What are you doing here? How much longer could they last? Time. Need to know how much time they had. Hunting. A mocking glint flashed in her eyes. It meant a small delay. Or maybe not. The wolf didn't want to fight. I see I was right before. You have indeed changed. Let us pass, the blue-eyed wolf pleaded. We need to flee. The she-wolf laughed. That harsh, unpleasant false laughter heard only by her interlocutor. Just let the traitor go? And his human ally? Is a fight inevitable after all? Let us pass, he repeated. Not long ago you spoke to me of fate. If you believe in it, let us go. The she-wolf didn't look away. She looked thoughtfully, warily. "You're with a human. I don't want to die as one who broke the law. Just don't wake up, Ray. Just don't wake up." "It's a child." He tried to stay calm. "She's asleep and won't remember you. I promise." The she-wolf silently approached. The werewolf was ready to defend himself. She cautiously looked at the girl and immediately backed away. "You're right. I believe in fate, and I see much more than I would like. I'm neither your enemy nor your ally." She repeated their previous conversation. "Run. Try to survive, and don't meet me again." The wolf nodded. "Thank you. Good hunting." She vanished as silently as she had appeared, and the wolf continued his flight. There were only a few hours until dawn. What would happen in the daytime? He didn't know yet. Maybe Ray, still sleeping on his back, knew. Chapter 7. Fight. They were being watched. The gray wolf realized it hopelessly late. An hour before dawn. An hour until he could transform. Time mercilessly tore the fabric of the night, weaving from its threads a pale gray fear. They ran through the forest. Ray was still asleep, but the werewolf had no time for sleep. Several times, he caught sight of a pale shadow slipping after them. Too late. Either wait for the attack or challenge it. He was an outcast and couldn't expect a fair fight. But anything was better than waiting for a blow from behind. He stopped and raised his head. A hoarse growl escaped his throat. The wolf was sure that the one he challenged would hear him. The blue-eyed beast took a few steps to the side. He bent down and carefully laid the still sleeping girl on the moss, behind the trees, as far as possible from the future battlefield. Now, just to wait. The wait didn't last long. In a few moments, he met the gaze of a dark white wolf. The pack leader was chasing him. It would be a fight to the death. The gray werewolf didn't lower his gaze. He looked into the cold, dark eyes and remembered. The first coming. The initiation. The ritual killing. Then, the real one. On the very first hunt. Night. And what happens during the day? Does he remain a wolf? Does he go mad, as the old legends say? Or... The leader's gaze expressed nothing but indifferent mockery. The werewolf looked into the eyes of the one who had forever replaced, for him and others like him, their mentor and father. He looked with desperate, grim determination. They lunged at each other almost simultaneously. The frenzy of the fight erased and blurred other feelings. All the cruelty the wolves held in their hearts filled this fight. The canopy of silence was torn by hoarse, furious howls. Gray and white fur flew in all directions. Both knew how to fight. Both didn't want to die. Both would go to the end. Yet the leader was more experienced. The first drops of blood splattered on the ground. The wounded gray wolf howled long and low. The leader gained the upper hand, but the sapphire-eyed werewolf wasn't going to give up. The battle continued. The trampled grass was soaked through with blood. The fugitive was losing, hopelessly losing. He had received more than one wound. The world in his eyes lost its colors. With a final effort, he raised his injured paw, and his opponent didn't have time to dodge. The gray wolf's claws ripped his chest open, and the werewolf, without looking away, watched the dark red, thick stream of blood trickle down. It grew larger, flowing to the ground. The crimson drops on the matted white fur looked strangely beautiful. In the suddenly glazed dark eyes, the glimmer of the setting sun was reflected, and it extinguished. In the gaze, now forever, cold pride froze. The blue-eyed wolf took a short breath and fell to the ground, next to the slain leader. His death was also near. He wouldn't remain a victor for long. An attempt to lick the wounds. A futile attempt. It ended foolishly. abruptly, somehow unexpectedly. But can the end be any different? Probably. For humans, but not for werewolves. He heard timid steps, felt the faint scent of herbs, and the wound seemed to reopen. The wolf growled. "Hold on, Marcus." Ray's quiet voice. The pain receded in waves. He regained the ability to see, and the first thing he did was examine himself. The wounds had turned into healing scars. Nothing was over yet. Ray smiled. "Are you a sorceress?" the wolf asked. The girl shrugged. "My mom worked with herbs. She taught me this." "Strange, it never worked before," she replied simply. He would never stop being surprised by this little one. But now they needed to move on. "Let's go, Ray. We'll rest later. It's better to move during the day. They will seek revenge for the fallen leader." "You won't be able to travel by day," she countered for some reason. Even if that's so. They had to move now. It didn't matter if he could or not. He had to. And yet he couldn't leave just like that. The gray wolf approached the leader's body and quietly howled a funeral song. Werewolves weren't buried. They were given farewell songs. After finishing the ceremony, he turned away. Tears were for humans. Ray easily climbed onto his back. Dawn was breaking. The sky to the east was turning crimson. The cold morning wind carried the scent of blood away from the site of the fight. Chapter 8. Awakening. With dawn, everything remained the same. More questions arose. They were on the run again. Marcus knew the day would bring new challenges. The horizon was already tinted with the colors of sunrise when he stopped at the edge of the forest. Here, in the shadows of ancient trees, they could hide from the morning light and rest. The wolf with sapphire eyes carefully laid the sleeping Ray on soft moss. He knew they had a little time. The chase could begin at any moment, but exhaustion and wounds demanded a break. He glanced around, checking the surroundings. Everything seemed calm, but his instincts told him to stay alert. Marcus settled next to the girl, feeling a strange calmness from her presence. He closed his eyes, slipping into a short sleep where images of the night battle and the mysterious forest emerged again. The black-eyed she-wolf and the pack leader, they all came to him, but now as memories. Time passed unnoticed. Marcus woke up to a light touch. Ray was looking at him with concern, her fiery red hair tousled. "Marcus, wake up. I hear something," she whispered. The wolf tensed, listening to the surrounding sounds. Indeed, there were footsteps and quiet conversations in the distance. They were closer than he expected. Time to move again. "Get up, Ray. We must go," he said, rising to his feet. The girl obediently stood up and hugged the wolf's neck tightly. Marcus cautiously made his way deeper into the forest, trying not to leave any traces. Their path lay through dense thickets where the light barely penetrated through the canopy of leaves. They walked in silence, each absorbed in their thoughts. The wolf felt the pain from his wounds gradually receding, but fatigue and anxiety didn't leave him. Ray looked around with curiosity and worry, her young eyes trying to catch every rustle. "Marcus, why are they chasing us?" she finally asked. "I broke the pack's laws, Ray, and now they want to catch us," he answered, not taking his eyes off the path. "But why? You didn't do anything wrong." The wolf stopped, turning his head to the girl. There was so much innocence and faith in her eyes that it hurt him more than any clawed paw. "It's hard to explain. The pack's laws are harsh, but I'm protecting you, and that's important." Ray nodded, though there were still questions in her eyes. They continued their way, but Marcus knew that many trials awaited them ahead. The forest became denser and darker. The trees closed in overhead, blocking out the daylight. This place seemed familiar to Marcus, as if he had been here before. He felt they were approaching something important, something that could change their fate. "We will stop here for a while," he said, stopping at a small clearing surrounded by tall trees. Ray sat down on the ground, leaning tiredly against a tree trunk. Marcus settled next to her, listening intently to the forest. He felt something was wrong, but couldn't understand what exactly. "Marcus, have you heard of this place before?" Ray asked, examining the trees. "Yes, it's an old forest. My pack once lived here, but we left it many years ago," he replied, recalling the stories of the elder werewolves. Ray sighed and closed her eyes, trying to rest. The wolf continued to stand guard, his instincts telling him that danger was near. Suddenly he heard a quiet rustle and tensed, ready for an attack. A stranger wolf emerged from behind the trees. His black fur and piercing green eyes stood out against the dark forest background. Marcus growled, ready for a fight, but the stranger raised a paw in a sign of peace. "Calm down. I'm not an enemy. My name is Drake. I came to help you," he said, his voice deep and confident. Marcus didn't immediately believe him, but something in Drake's eyes spoke of honesty. He slowly lowered his paw, continuing to watch the stranger closely. "Why do you want to help us?" he asked, not hiding his distrust. "I knew your father, Marcus. He was a great wolf, and I respect his memory. You shouldn't suffer because of unjust laws," Drake replied, his eyes softening. Marcus felt something in his soul responding to the stranger's words. He remembered his father, a strong and wise leader, and realized he could trust Drake. "All right, but be ready for anything unexpected. We must be cautious," he said, stepping forward. Drake nodded and came closer. Ray opened her eyes and looked at the new wolf in surprise. "Who is this, Marcus?" she asked quietly. "This is Drake. He came to help us," he replied, turning to the girl. She nodded and smiled, feeling that now they had a chance at salvation. Together, they continued their journey, hoping that luck would be on their side. Time passed, and the forest grew darker. Drake led them along paths known only to the chosen ones. Marcus felt they were approaching something significant, a place where their pursuers wouldn't find them. Finally, they came to a large clearing surrounded by high cliffs. Here, among the greenery and shadows, stood an old temple covered in moss and branches. This place seemed abandoned, but Marcus felt they would be safe here. "Here we can rest. This temple was built by our ancestors, and we won't be found here," Drake said, leading them inside. Ray looked around the old stone walls and ancient symbols carved into them with interest. Marcus felt the tension gradually leaving, giving way to hope. They settled in one of the temple's rooms where the werewolves once prayed. Drake lit a small fire to warm up and prepare food. Ray sat next to Marcus, hugging his neck. "Will we be safe here, Marcus?" she asked, her voice full of hope. "Yes, Ray. Here we can rest and gain strength," he replied, feeling his heart begin to calm down. They spent several days in the temple, recovering and preparing for the next stage of their journey. Drake taught Marcus and Ray, telling them about the old traditions and laws the werewolves once followed. Marcus felt his bond with Ray growing stronger. She was not just a human. She was his friend and ally. Together they overcame difficulties and learned new things. Several weeks passed, and Marcus realized it was time to move on. He and Ray couldn't stay in the temple forever. There were many questions in their lives that they needed to find answers to. "Drake, thank you for everything. But we need to move on," Marcus said, looking into the eyes of his new friend. "I understand, Marcus. Your journey is not over yet. I wish you luck and hope you find what you're looking for," Drake replied, his voice full of sincerity. Ray smiled and hugged Drake, feeling grateful for everything he had done for them. Marcus nodded and led her to the temple's exit. Ahead lay a new path, full of challenges and discoveries. They left the temple feeling stronger and wiser. The forest once again surrounded them with its shadows, but now they knew they could handle any danger. Marcus and Ray moved forward, confident they could overcome any difficulties together. So ended one of the most challenging periods in their lives. But new adventures, new friends, and new enemies awaited them ahead. And though the path was tough, Marcus knew that with Ray by his side, he could face anything. Their story was just beginning, and there was much unknown ahead.